What's poppin', everybody? This is Tom and Joey Entertainment. I am Joey and welcome to The Realest News. This is where Tom and I keep it real and discuss important news stories that are going on all around the world. And speaking of, as always, I am joined by Tom. Tom, what is happening?
What's happening, Joey? Ready to get some hot takes on this new travel ban, and I'm here to have a good time.
Here to have a good time and get some hot takes. As Tom mentioned, the topic of discussion today is Trump's new travel ban. Now, how this discussion is going to work, we're going to kind of give you an overview of the new travel ban, and then we're going to go into specific details of the legislation. On Monday, March 6, 2017, Trump signed his second travel ban, which was an executive order that blocks citizens of 6 predominantly Muslim countries from entering the United States. The 6 countries included on Trump's new executive order are Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen. Now, this is obviously his second travel ban, as the first one was shut down by the federal courts on the grounds of that it was unconstitutional. Now, some of the new things included on Trump's Travel Plan 2.0. The ban is not immediate, unlike the last travel ban where it went into effect as soon as Trump signed it. This new travel ban will go into effect on March 16th. And one of the lone positives of the new travel ban is that Iraq is also removed from the list of banned countries. Current visa holders are no longer affected, and Syrian refugees are only barred temporarily and not indefinitely. Refugees of minority religions are no longer favored, and refugees already granted asylum will now be allowed to stay in the country and enter the country. Now, although this is a revised travel ban and regarded as an improvement by many, organizations such as the United Nations has already given it flack. In an article published by The Guardian, the UN came out and said that the new travel ban will only increase the woes of the world's refugees, as some of the Muslim majority countries affected by the ban expressed their disappointment, insisting that they have always fully cooperated with the U.S. anti-terrorist efforts. The UN High Commissioner for Refugees said refugees are not criminals but, quote, ordinary people forced to flee war, violence, and persecution in their home countries. Now, the first piece of legislation that we're going to discuss is the legislation that lists out why the travel ban is being implemented. Text within the executive order reads, "The screening and vetting protocols and procedures associated with the visa insurance process in the United States Refugee Admissions Program plays a crucial role in detecting foreign nationals who may commit, aid, or support acts of terrorism and in preventing those individuals from entering the United States." So, Tom, my first question to you is this new travel ban actually help national security, or does it actually hurt our national security?
So I actually don't really think it does either. I don't really think it's as simple to say like, oh, does it help or does it hurt? Because on one side, definitely don't think it helps, because I just don't think that there's this huge existential threat to the United States that a lot of people, including the Trump administration, believe exists. I mean, don't get me wrong, we've talked about it before, but anyone that's going to threaten the security of our citizens, I think, should be taken seriously. But let's look at the facts. Let's look at how many attacks have really happened from these organizations that are outside of the US. There aren't a lot of instances where that's happened. And not to mention this travel ban of where they're targeting. A lot of those countries that are being targeted now aren't even a part of those attacks. The biggest terrorist attack on US soil is 9/11. And as we mentioned in our last episode, the overwhelming majority of the people participating in those attacks were Saudi Arabian. And we don't see Saudi Arabia in the travel ban. I don't necessarily think this helps, but I also don't, I guess, think it hurts national security, just because I don't think it puts us at a huge disadvantage. I can understand that. I mean, the first one was deemed unconstitutional, and you saw a very, very aggressive crowd that was hostile at airports and protesting very, very emphatically, and I think that creates civil unrest, and in that sense, yes, that is a threat to national security, but I don't really think it does either. I just kind of think it's a bill that's probably, honestly, I could just see it get shot down again, but I guess time will tell.
Yeah, and like you said, I think the biggest piece of evidence that supports this notion that this travel ban should not even be implemented is one of the studies and the graphics done by the Cato Institute. This study shows that the number of Americans killed by refugees from 1975 to 2015 from the countries on the travel ban is a massive 0. Unlike countries such as Saudi Arabia, now the number for Saudi Arabia is 2,369 because they are attributing that because the Saudi Arabians were the main components of the attack of 9/11. And you also have the United Arab Emirates with 314, Egypt with 162, Lebanon with 159. So because of the fact that no actual terrorists have committed any acts of terrorism on United States soil from any of the countries included in the travel ban, I just don't think you have any grounds to justify this travel ban altogether. Whether it actually helps helps or hurts our national security, in my opinion, I think it actually hurts our national security in the grand scheme of things. Now, when you look at the immediate national security, I think really, if you're preventing refugees from coming into the country, no matter where they're coming from, I guess in a sense that kind of helps your national security for a short term. But you look at the grand scheme of things, that what this travel ban represents, and the mentality that we talked about in last week's episode, the West kind of rejecting the Muslim faith and rejecting the ideologies and the mentality and the belief system and the values of the Middle East and countries in the Middle East, I think it actually hurts our national security in the long run, because you have or more people that are segregated into these groups as a part of these countries and separated into these groups of refugees that are now banned from traveling into our country. It kind of segregates certain groups, and the last thing you want to do is segregate people, especially on the terms of their faith. And speaking of discrimination based on faith, that brings us into our second piece of legislation that we wanted to discuss. The legislation included in Trump's new executive order that actually provides basis for his first executive order that was shut down by federal courts. The text says, Executive Order 13769, which is Trump's first travel ban, did not provide a basis for discriminating for or against members of any particular religion. The order was not motivated by animus towards any religion, but was instead intended to protect the ability of religious minorities to avail themselves in light of their particular challenges and circumstances. So Tom, my question to you is, and it kind of involves really the biggest controversy surrounding this travel ban, especially the first travel ban and even this one. I mean, many people are calling it a Muslim ban. So my question to you is, do you actually think that it can be justified by calling this travel ban a quote-unquote Muslim ban?
I'm just going to look at what Donald Trump said. And before he ran for president, he called for quote-unquote a total and complete ban on all immigrants coming from Muslim countries. So I look at the record and I hear him say he wants all Muslims basically banned from the U.S. and then he imposes a travel ban. And then me as a citizen, I just connect two and two together. I don't think it's outrageous to call it a Muslim ban, but I don't really think that's the story. I understand that that's the basis for why it was shot down. It shouldn't be surprising to me. I mean, this is something that he's been preaching for a long time. So I'm more surprised that people's surprised reactions, to be honest, because he's been saying this for a long time. But I do find it ironic that a man who ran on the platform of a straight shooter, and he tells it like it is having his press secretary and Sean Spicer debating with the media if it's quote unquote a Muslim ban or quote unquote if it's a ban in general. And when the media says, but you said it was a ban, they say, oh no, well, it's not a ban. That's what you said. You called it a ban yourself. And then now they want to say, oh, but it's not a Muslim ban. For his administration to try and pretend like, oh, this isn't it, I feel like we should kind of just cut out the BS and just level with each other on a level playing field and be like, listen, we know what your agenda is. We know what you're trying to do. Like, you're not going to be able to trick us. Like, you're not getting away from this. This is what you said. We're using your own words. It's not like this conspiracy that was brought up by this fake news source or something like that. I mean, this is what you did.
Yeah, and I couldn't agree more. I really think the biggest justification for people classifying this travel ban, the first travel ban and this new version of the travel ban, as a quote-unquote Muslim ban is the fact that Donald Trump came out and said specifically that's what he wanted to do within his campaign. And the fact that he came out and said Christian refugees are going to be favored in getting them out of the Syrian conflict and out of countries that have war and conflict going on within them. If you don't want people to justify your travel ban as a quote-unquote Muslim ban, and if you're saying that, okay, you're not necessarily that you're only attacking Muslims, but you're saying that you do want to favor Christians, no matter how you put it, the language and the symbolism is still there. So if you not only, one, come out in your campaign and say, I am going to push for a complete and total shutdown of Muslim refugees coming into the country, after you implement the first version of the legislation, come out and say that you're going to favor getting Christian refugees and taking care of Christian refugees over any other refugees, by all means, people have the justification to classify this travel ban as a Muslim ban. The third piece of legislation as a part of the executive order that we wanted to look at is actually the lone positive, close cooperative relationship between the United States and the democratically elected Iraqi government, the strong United States diplomatic presence in Iraq, the significant presence of United States forces, and Iraq's commitment to combat ISIS justifies different treatment for Iraq. So Tom, my question to you is, as the lone positive really of this travel ban, do you agree that Iraq should have been removed from the list? And given the situation, obviously we were both for not even having a travel ban to begin with and not even listing specific countries. But given the countries that were listed in the travel ban, knowing that you can't do away with all of them, A, do you think Iraq was justifiably removed from the list? And B, do you think any other country should have been removed from the list or even add to the list?
I mean, it seems that Trump's administration is pretty on board with this. I mean, you look at some pretty high-ranking members of his cabinet saying that this is a good idea. And then when you look, I mean, just look at the facts. You look at the details. You look at what Iraq has done, the steps they've taken, establishing a strong diplomatic government that's going to help combat radicalized terrorist organizations. They've really, ever since the Iraq War, I mean, there was a lot of damage done, and they've really built from the ashes, so to speak, and they're combating the threats that we deem a threat to our national security. So it should be no surprise to me. It really shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. Overall, I think it'll be well perceived. Trump has one justification for a country if he's going to pick one. Personally, I don't agree with it. If he were to promote a Syria ban, I think that he could get a lot of citizens on board with it. You look at the news in general and you see, okay, ISIS camps in Syria. You see massive amounts of refugees coming in to different countries. And then you hear about these terrorist attacks in Europe, for instance. I think he could make a case and say, listen, we're just trying to implement a policy that's not going to take in these vast amount of refugees from Syria. He kind of laid out a plan and missed the target, had this spew of countries that a lot of people probably don't understand. And then obviously it's just the travel component. It makes this more of a personal attack on a religion and less like, oh, I'm concerned about national security and this is the appropriate policy to help with that.
The one country that he could have justification for would be Syria, because when you think of ISIS and when you think of the refugee crisis in general, I mean, the refugee crisis is not just the United States. I mean, do not think that we're the only ones dealing with the refugee crisis. Europe, I mean, they're surrounded by countries that are dealing with a refugee crisis, so they have to deal with it on a daily basis, much more than we have to. So when you look at really this Syrian civil war and the Syrian conflict is really the biggest reason why all these refugees are dispersing and why they're all becoming refugees. Syria could definitely be something that he could justifiably put on the travel ban. And as we mentioned earlier, Saudi Arabia. I mean, like we mentioned last week, 14 of the 19 hijackers were Saudi Arabian. Their human rights violations are through the roof. Really, the only reason why we don't have any salty language towards Saudi Arabia and the reason why we try to work with them, I mean, let's not be naive. Saudi Arabia is one of the biggest oil empires in the world. Even though Trump could justifiably put Syria and Saudi Arabia on the travel ban, like we said, we don't want a travel ban to begin with. We don't think that countries should be specifically listed. I think it should just be, if anything, an increase in vetting. And the fact that he was able to compromise and remove Iraq off the list is actually one of the positives for me moving forward with the Trump administration, because you look at the two biggest higher up cabinet positions that were pushing to remove Iraq off the list were Secretary of State Rex Tillerson and Secretary of Defense James Mattis. The fact that Trump was able to listen to his advisors, especially advisors that are highly more intelligent on foreign policy and foreign relations and stuff of this matter than he is, the fact that Trump was able to listen to his advisors, listen to his peers, compromise on legislation that he really put forward is really a good sign heading forth in the future of the Trump administration, because it shows, maybe we can all hope, that Trump is actually listening to their expertise of their job responsibilities, listening to their expertise of why they're even in that position in the first place. Like we mentioned last week in the last episode, the importance of the State Department. James Mattis, Secretary of Defense, and Rex Tillerson, Secretary of State, those are both members of the State Department. The importance of bringing Iraq off the travel ban and the increased relations now that brings with Iraq, because they have already came out and said that they are happy about the cooperation that the U.S. has had with removing them from the travel ban, and that they themselves will work to increase vetting within their country of refugees coming to the United States. You look at all the positive that has come from Iraq removing from the list, even though we do think that all countries should be removed from the list. I think the fact that him listening to Rex Tillerson and James Mattis and positive outcomes coming from him listening to them is definitely good things to come with the Trump administration. So there you have it, everybody. There are our thoughts on Trump's travel ban. If you have the same opinion as us, if you have a different opinion, or if you just want to share your opinion in general, please, as always, leave a comment in the section below. We would love to hear from you. And as always, if you like the video, go ahead and give it a like underneath that video and hit that subscribe button if you want to come back and see more videos every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And as always, I'm Joey.
And I'm Tom.
We'll see y'all next time. Peace.